Vaishnav Guru Varga ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glory assembled devotees Hare Krishna, all glory assembled devotees Hare Krishna, all glory assembled devotees Hare Krishna, all glory Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glory Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading today from Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text 26. Tato Nanda Vrajamitaha, Tato Nanda Vrajamitaha, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Ekadasha Samastatra, Ekadasha Samastatra, Gurarchihi Sabalo Vasat, Gurarchi Sabalo Vasat. Tato Nanda Vrajamitaha, Tato Nanda Vrajamitaha, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Ekadasha Samastatra, Ekadasha Samastatra, Gurarchi Sabalo Vasat, Gurarchi Sabalo Vasat. Tato Nanda Vrajamitaha, Tato Nanda Vrajamitaha, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Ekadasha Samastatra, Ekadasha Samastatra, Gurarchi Sabalo Vasat, Gurarchi Sabalo Vasat. Tato Nanda Vrajamita, Pitrakam Sad Vibibhyata, Ekadasha Samastatra, Gurarchi Sabalo Vasat. Tata, thereafter, Nanda Vrajam, cow pastures of Nanda Maharaj. Itaha, being brought up. Pitra, by his father. Kamsat, from Kamsa. Vibibhyata, being afraid of. Ekadasha, 11. Samaha, years. Tatra, therein. Gurha archihi, covered fire. Sa balaha, with Baladev. Avasat, resided. Translation. Thereafter, his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladev. Purport. There was no necessity of the Lord's being dispatched to the house of Nanda Maharaj out of fear of Kamsa's determination to kill him as soon as he appeared. It is the business of the Asuras to try to kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or to prove by all means that there is no God, or that Krishna is an ordinary being and not God. Lord Krishna is not affected by such determination of men of Kamsa's class, but in order to play the role of a child, he agreed to be carried by his father to the cow pastures of Nanda Maharaj, because Vasudev was afraid of Kamsa. Nanda Maharaj was due to receive him as his child, and Yashoda Mai was also to enjoy the childhood pastimes of the Lord. And therefore, to fulfill everyone's desire, he was carried from Mathura to Vrindavan just after his appearance in the prison house of Kamsa. He lived there for 11 years and completed all his fascinating pastimes of childhood, boyhood, and adolescence with his elder brother, Lord Baladeva. His first expansion. Vasudeva's thought of protecting Krishna from the wrath of Kamsa is part of a transcendental relationship. The Lord enjoys more when someone takes him as a subordinate son who needs the protection of a father than he does when someone accepts him as a supreme Lord. He is the father of everyone, and he protects everyone. But when his devotee takes it for granted that the Lord is to be protected by the devotee's care, it is a transcendental joy for the Lord. Thus, when Vasudev, out of fear of Kamsa, carried him to Vrindavan, the Lord enjoyed it. Otherwise, he had no fear from Kamsa or anyone else. And again, the translation. Therefore, thereafter, his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother, Baladev. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha Vanchakalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we've just continued reading from this chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. It's a little different. So, we've just continued reading from this chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, a very rasic chapter. I've been saying for every week that we've been reading from this chapter. When I first read it, I was really caught off guard, because the whole time reading into the Bhagavatam, the previous two cantos, as we know, are either very much Mahabharata sort of style pastimes, and then second canto is just a complete barrage of philosophy. But then third canto, I started reading it and I got up to this chapter, and I was waiting for the 10th canto. That's when I was getting ready to hear all the rasic pastimes. But then here they are, so quick and so early. And so the previous texts, they've been discussing Uddhav's Prem and all sorts of other things. But now we're coming to the wonderful description that is given of Krishna's pastimes. And so we're now hearing of the Janma Leela. And Srila Prabhupada, he brings out a very, very sweet point and central theme of the Janma, of Krishna's Janma Leela. There's one word, one concept which he focuses on entirely throughout the entire purport, and that is that of fear. Fear is a very central emotion. It's a very central aspect of our human experience. In fact, we can say fear is in many ways the most powerful feeling that humans have. In general, it's considered by most psychologists that there's all sorts of emotions that motivate people to do all sorts of things. Anger, love, all sorts of things. But the highest, or rather the most compelling to people, is fear. People will do terrible things when under the influence of fear. And we find it oh so amazing when people go against fear, because everyone understands the power that fear has. And so, even the majority of people who come to spiritual life do so motivated by fear. Fear of dying, fear of unhappiness, fear of all sorts of things. In marketing, we find all the time, for the most serious cases, fear is the main point of advertising. We find even from things like smoking advertisements. All of this backfired. I know in Port Macquarie, where I grew up, they used to have, well, everywhere, they have on the smoking packets, they have all the little pictures of people with all sorts of illnesses, but all of the boys my age would collect them like trading cards, so they'd get one of each photo. So in that case, the fear tactic sort of backfired. Thank you. But in general, we find fear is that great motivator, and advertising, in all sorts of things. And again, people are so strongly motivated by it. Especially the past year or so in Australia, we've seen fear has been a very, very big aspect of our climate. First we had the bushfires, and of course, so as I said, I grew up in Port Macquarie, so I was seeing firsthand from people just how intense they were afraid of all of these things. So fear was a very big aspect for the bushfires, and then we might have had a global epidemic. You may have heard of it, and that happened, which of course also brought lots of fear to the forefront. And then now we're having this flooding, which we're currently in. So there's a lot of fear everywhere. And naturally, of course, it's something that we can't run away from. It was something I was reflecting on during the bushfire times, but now I'm thinking about again, now that the flooding's happening. We sort of can sanitize fear in contemporary, especially Western culture. It's very much a cleaned up thing with our cars and buildings and medicine and everything. We sort of hide away from how real death and all those things that inspire fear are. So people are very afraid now because it's sort of shaken away the confidence they had that there will be some degree of safety. Because of course the feeling of safety is the feeling that fear doesn't need to come here. But again, all those things are little constructs, little safe, fake comfort zones that are created. And in great crises like those, we find that those are pulled away. But as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, Krishna, he does not feel such fear. Other people do. The whole pastime of the Janma Leela is filled with fear. Kamsa, he's so afraid of dying. Very much the asura that he is. So in Bhagavatam, we'll hear many instances of people being told they will pass away, that they will die. And most of them, they respond positively. We know Khatvanga, he renounces the world and enters into meditation knowing he's going to die in the next moment. And in that one moment, he perfects his life. Maharaj Parikshit, of course, the focal point of the Bhagavatam, we could say. He hears, I'm going to die in 7 days. And what does he do? He says, well, surely I should hear the highest knowledge. And he hears Bhagavad Gita. What an elevated way to pass away. So, we hear a moment to die, 7 days to die, and then Kamsa hears, after quite a few children, which is quite a few years, he will die, and he panics and breaks down. The others had a week or less, and they so gloriously entered into spiritual life. And Kamsa hears he's got around a decade to go, and he has a breakdown. Decides to kill everything in his sight. Fear. Of course, because he is an asura, he is a demon, and this is a very demonic mindset. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he writes in his very famous essay, Putana. It's an amazing essay. It's very, very much written in the style of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So even though it's around a few pages long, it took me like 2 hours to process. But in it, he analyzes Putana. And he goes following Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's analysis in Chaitanya Shikshamrita, where he identifies Putana as the false guru. Because the false guru, he'll take the young spiritual aspirant and he'll pretend to feed this aspirant with spiritual knowledge, but actually he will feed it with poison and kill its spiritual life. So the false guru is Putana. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his genius, he expands this point and he says that Putana actually is all religious institutions. He was speaking of the evil of the religious institute. Of course, we shouldn't take this as a condemnation of a religious institute, because then Saraswati Thakur went on to found the Gauriya Math, which is one of the biggest religious institutes of its time. But still, he was decrying the evils. So that people would know it's almost a necessary evil to have a religious institute which can administer a necessary good, which is, of course, spiritual life. So anyways, making this point, and he actually has a wonderful line. I'm digressing a little, but he says that the most popular church, and by church he means any religious institute, any mosque, temple, whatever, spiritual organization. He says the most successful church of this age will be the church of convenient atheism in the guise of theism. The greatest success we will have in this world in terms of religious organization will be a sort of pathetic, half-hearted atheism with the cute, wholesome imagery of religion. The atheists who aren't committed enough to go all the way and just renounce it all. They want the cuteness of spiritual life without any of the grit, so to speak. So very convenient atheism. And we see this all the time. People say atheism is rising in society. People say, oh, look how high so many people are becoming atheists. But actually, I would probably say theism is growing. This apparent growth in atheism, they say for every one person who enters into the Catholic Church, 4 or 5 leave. But this apparent growth in atheism is actually just manifesting the true svarup, if you will, of these atheists. They're just coming up front. I never really believed it anyways. And when it becomes less and less cute, less and less fashionable, yeah, I'll leave. So, anyways, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says of Kamsa, however, in the beginning points of his essay, that Kamsa represents the atheistic scholars. The atheistic scholars who use grammatical rules to analyze the meanings of the Veda, who try to break it down into its grammatical relations, who try to break it down like some mundane text and do not enter into it with the proper mindset of devotion. And so Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that. He says these are the 3 different activities of the asuras. The asuras either try to kill Krishna, God, deny God's existence, or deny that Krishna is God. And we found many events of this. There was a popular movement in India. We know there's many, especially in the 20th century. All the time there was all sorts of bogus movements coming up. But in the 20th century, under the colonialization of thought, some real special ideas started getting whipped up. And there was one group, and they believed that actually, we need to go back to what the Vedas originally said. And so they went through systematically and they cut out a bit here, cut out a bit there. Mahabharata is mythology. All the Puranas are mythology. Big parts of the Yajurveda are mythology. Really just the sections of Rig Veda that we like. That's the real Vedic religion. So they had this idea and they said, oh, Krishna, he had some good points, but he's not God. This is the Asura mentality. So anyways, these ideas, of course, they will bring fear naturally. Such a great confidence in our own abilities can only produce fear. Because what abilities? Even in the most perfected stage, still a jiva is Vibhu Chaitanya. It's the small consciousness. It's not that great consciousness, which the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. And if something small relies upon itself, then that is a very fearful existence indeed. So, not only is there that fear, which is the mundane fear, but there is also a much more pleasant fear in this pastime. And that is the fear of Vasudev. We know this is a very famous pastime. After Krishna reveals all of his Aishvarya to Vasudev and Devaki, Vasudev then he carries Krishna away. Of course, we know this is only the second Krishna to be born. This is the Lord of Dwarka, the Lord filled with opulence. Elsewhere, Mother Jashoda, without realizing it, because even in Bhagavatam we have the description that she's passed out in the intensity of giving childbirth, which, I'll never know how intense it is, but I've heard it's pretty rough. So in that intensity, she's passed out. And she hasn't realized that she's actually given birth to twins. One is, of course, the Krishna who will be staying eternally in Vraj. And, of course, then the other is Yogamaya. So Vasudev, he goes and he carries this child. We know the wonderful pastime. Everyone's magically fallen asleep. And so he goes and he walks across the Jamuna, and then he places down that baby Krishna he had, and he places it on top of one twin, and they merge together. Because during Vraj Leela, the two Krishnas, they sort of, you could say they merge into each other, or one's on top of the other, and because of that you can't tell who's where. But actually they merge together. And then of course when Akrura comes, then Dwarkadish, he leaves, he goes and he rules Dwarka, and the other Krishna, there's different explanations of where he goes. One explanation that I particularly like is that Krishna actually hides in the hearts of all the gopis, especially Srimati Radharani, so that later on, a few thousand years later, he's stolen that golden aspect which he needs to become Mahaprabhu. That's one explanation that's given. There's many, but an easier one is you just can't see him. He's Krishna. He can do whatever he wants. We don't really need to know where he went. Anyway, so he goes off. So like this happens. And there's an interesting question, actually, that I often wonder, and I haven't necessarily conclusively found some pramana on it, but we find many mentions of Krishna's sister. We find three aspects, three different sort of times where Krishna has a sister. We find this, the Yogamaya, which Mother Jashoda has given birth to. We find Subhadra, the daughter of Rohini, who marries Arjuna. And we find Subhadra, who's on the altar with Baladev, Jagannath Subhadra. I think it's relatively safe to assume that the last two Subhadras are the same. But when reading the descriptions of the one who's been given birth by Mother Jashoda, that could very well be Subhadra. But we know that when Vasudev brings back this Yogamaya, and Srila Prabhupada does refer to her as Yogamaya, when he brings her back to Devaki, at this point he has brought back Mahamaya. Yogamaya remains residing in Vraj, and we know that in general we can't really refer to Mahamaya as Subhadra. Srila Prabhupada writes in a letter, now I've forgotten who, I think to either Upendra or Umapati Maharaj, somebody beginning with a U. So he writes in the letter that Bhadra is Mahamaya, but Subhadra is Yogamaya. Su makes the aspect, the internal aspect. So it might be the same personality, it might not be. In general, the wife of Arjuna is described as a child of Rohini, but as we know in Krishna Leela, whose child gets really complicated. It all sort of gets mixed up. So we could say that maybe they're two aspects of each other, whatever. But at the very least, the child that's brought back to Devaki would be Bhadra. And this is how Bhagavatam describes her. Bhadre, she's referred to in this way, not as Subhadre. Anyways, so we have this whole thing happens. And all of this is happening out of fear of Kamsa. But as we know, this is not Krishna's fear. This is the fear of the devotee. And Krishna loves this fear. This fear where the devotee seeks to take care of Krishna. This is a fear that is very much relished by Krishna. Because, of course, Vasudev and Devaki, they are great devotees. We know so famously in their many lifetimes ago, they were Prishni and Sutapa. And they performed great austerities. And then the Supreme Lord appeared before them and they said, we wish to be your parent. And that's how they became Devaki and Vasudev. We also read in Bhagavatam a similar story about Mother Jashoda and Nanda Maharaj. We hear that they were Drona and Dhara. A long time ago, they were demigods, and they were childless demigods, so they were very sad. And so they went to Brahma, and they asked Brahma, they said, we'd really like Krishna as a child. We would really like him as a child. Can you do this for us? And so then, of course, they became the parents of Krishna. Now, hopefully, we're wondering, this sounds like Apasiddhanta, this sounds a little odd. How can we say the Nitya Siddha, Parikar, the eternal associates of the Lord, how can we say that they attained their position? It's not like the case of the sadhana siddhas who eventually reach there and reach a certain point. Mother Jashoda, Nanda Maharaj, we hear they're Nitya Siddha, not sadhana siddha. They've eternally been in their position. They've not worked their way there through sadhana. So how can we understand this? In general, in Bhagavatam or in any Shastra, if we find two contradictions, so to speak, we should always take the later instance, the later tattva that is explained, and explain the previous tattvas in light of that, with the exception being, of course, the Paribhash Sutra. The whole text, what comes before and what comes after, is to be interpreted in light of that. So, of course, in Bhagavatam, it's Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So, we find this mention of Drona and Dhara very briefly, because Parikshit Maharaj, he asks Shukadev, he says, oh, Nanda Maharaj, Mother Jashoda, what fortune they have, how could they attain such a thing? And so Maharaj Parikshit speaks as pastime, almost as encouragement, that yes, you can do it too. He's sort of saying this to Parikshit Maharaj. But of course, Parikshit Maharaj is also a great personality. It's more of a yes, you can do this too to everyone else who hears Bhagavatam. But it still nevertheless is a problem. And in the next chapter, which is the 9th chapter, we then hear descriptions of Mother Jashoda and Nanda Maharaj as being Nitya Siddha. So here we have big contradiction, faith shattering. But actually, it's no real problem. We hear our previous acharyas have explained rather clearly that Drona and Dhara, we know that at the beginning of Krishna Leela, all the demigods, they're coming down and taking positions in Krishna Leela. But this also is a little confusing because Krishna Leela is eternal in Golok Vrindavan. So actually it's sort of like those Russian dolls, a person within a person within a person. Because even though Drona and Dhara, they're coming down like this, they're actually angshas, small aspects of the angshi of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Jashoda in the spiritual world. So Nanda Maharaj and Mother Jashoda, they have their small little angsha and they come down, they do this pastime, and then when Krishna Leela begins, then they merge back into their source. The angsha comes back into the angshi, like this. So a little complicated, again, a little bit like the Russian dolls, but this is Krishna Leela. And it's very nectarian all the more for it. So then people can see these pastimes, because one might wonder, it's a bit unnecessary. Firstly, there is no unnecessary in Krishna Leela. Krishna does what he wants, and so do all of his associates, and that's the beauty of it. But there is a purpose to this specific one. Again, as I said, we can see this is the means by which one can attain such a high destination. And now one may wonder, why didn't Prishni and Sutapa, why didn't they receive this? Why did Drona and Dhara receive the higher position? Of course, sometimes devotees, in order to emphasize the beauty of rasa, they emphasize so much the glory of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Jashoda over Devaki and Vasudev. But it's not that we should think lowly of Devaki and Vasudev. Not that we should get so caught up in our excitement, even to be a particle of dust in Vaikuntha is the most worshipable thing. But still, nevertheless, they are in a very high position. And there's a few reasons why. But the main reason, because I do want to get to the other points, there's lots of reasons that have been given why. But the main reason why is because Sutapa and Vrishni, they asked the Supreme Personality of Godhead for this position. But Drona and Dhara, they asked the devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They asked Brahma, who was a great devotee. We know, at least in this cycle, he's a great devotee. So they asked the devotee, and therefore they received the higher benediction than those who asked the Supreme Personality directly. Again, we know this is one of the essential, I was going to say basic, but it's not very basic. It's foundational. It's present both in the beginning and in the very end of spiritual life. Never do we run away from the mercy of the Vaishnavas. Because the Vaishnavas can give the highest of things. The Vaishnavas can give even that which Krishna cannot. But how can Krishna give love for Krishna? That would be a bit narcissistic. Krishna doesn't have much love for himself, of course, until he resolves all that in Gaur Leela. But Krishna himself, he cannot give Krishna prem. But the devotees, they can. That's one example. But in general, we find the Vaishnavas, so much mercy they have. And this pastime is illustrating that point. We can enter into Aishvarya maybe by the mercy of the Lord, but to enter into Madhurya, we can enter only through the mercy of the Vaishnavas. Which is, of course, also a chastisement of the Prakrita Sahajiyas, who we should relish chastising, actually. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was once asked, who's worse, a Mayavadi or a Sahajiya? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said, who is worse, the thief or the counterfeit? The counterfeiter. Because the Mayavadis are like thieves. They're trying to steal away the supremacy of Krishna. But the Sahajiyas are counterfeiters. They're trying to cheat everyone with fake coins. So which one is worse? Up to you. You make the call. But they're both pretty terrible. So not like the Sahajiyas do. I will go directly and I will read Ras Leela. I will meditate on my Siddha Swarup. I've heard stories actually in some Sahajiya circles. They'll give you your Swarup at initiation, your Swarup. And they'll tell you, you are so-and-so Manjari, you are so-and-so this. And I remember hearing one story of one devotee who went and he heard his Swarup and he was meditating very deeply on it. And then after a while he struggled with his sadhana and he sort of left spiritual life. And then he came back, but his spiritual master, his guru, had passed away. So he went under the shelter of another guru. But he thought he'll just ask that guru, well, what's my Siddha Swarup? And he told him a completely other form. Before he was some other manjari. So now this, we can either understand that either the Sahajiyas are bogus or that this devotee is some elevated personality with two Swarups. I think the former is probably more likely. So anyways, not like the Sahajiyas do. Run into the Ras Leela. Directly I can experience all these things. No. If one wants to experience the great Madhurya pastimes, we must approach through the devotee, through the Vaishnav. And all the Vaishnavas have told us that where fools rush in, angels dare to tread. Something like that. I can't remember. Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, he loves that quote. He says it all the time. So, we find all of these tattvas in this pastime. Now, I've been stressing that Krishna, he does not feel, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does not feel this fear, but he relishes it when his devotees feel this fear. But there might be something of a contradiction here. Can anyone guess what the issue might come up if we say Krishna does not feel this fear? So Krishna, he is described as Rasaraj, the king of all rasas. How can Rasaraj not be tasting this rasa? How can Krishna, Rasaraj, not be tasting some emotion, even like fear, which is so central to that emotional corpus? And this is not a minor point. If you read the Nectar of Devotion and Chaitanya Charitamrita, my two favorite of, not that you can have favorites of Prabhupada's books, but naturally we're individuals. We can enjoy things more. And Nectar of Devotion in particular, I really love, because it's making this point completely throughout. Sometimes people, they'll read Nectar of Devotion and they'll think this isn't like Bhagavad Gita, which is logically making proofs for the soul or anything. But actually, all of Nectar Devotion practically is one elongated argument that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because of all of the beauty that is found in him. This is the whole point. And just another little tangent. I was just reflecting on how everything Srila Prabhupada does is in parampara. Nothing is done outside of the mood and example of our previous acharyas. And I was thinking, even Srila Prabhupada writing the Nectar of Devotion, this is done in parampara. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he also wrote a Nectar of Devotion. We might have heard of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu, a drop from the ocean of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is a small little drop. And what is it? It is a summary study of Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So here we find even Srila Prabhupada's summary studies done so clearly within the footsteps of the acharyas. Srila Prabhupada did not bring anything novel. If we see any novelties, it's either a small detail or it's our vision unable to see the essence. Everything he did was in parampara, even writing his summary studies. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur wrote a few. He also wrote Ujjvala, Nilamani, Kirana, a few other. There are all these summary studies. He did a little bunch of them. Anyway, so Nectar of Devotion makes this point throughout. Krishna, he's tasting all these rasas. All of these rasas, he's tasting them. So then how can we say that Krishna, he is not tasting this fear? And actually, we would be wrong to say that Krishna does not taste fear at all. Krishna does not taste the fear of being afraid of demons, because that is not the type of fear that is that he likes to relish. But Krishna does relish the rasa of fear. This is an essential rasa. And so Krishna does. And we know he does because he does through his mother Yashoda. Yashoda is less famously known as the birth mother of Krishna. Everyone knows her as the mother of Krishna, but not as the birth mother. But she also gave birth, as I was describing earlier. But she's fine with everyone knowing Devaki as the main mother of Krishna. Even though actually Devaki is another name of Mother Yashoda. So a lot of the references to Devaki being the mother of Krishna are true. Because even though Devaki is the mother of Krishna, even the Vrajanath Krishna, even he also, his mother is Devaki, because Devaki is also another name for Yashoda. So there's that aspect. But even more so, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has defined the name Yashoda as being Yasho Dadati. Yasho means fame, and Dadati means giving. So she is happy to give the fame of being the mother of Krishna to Devaki. Because what does she need? Does she need the fame of the world? She has Krishna as her child. Why does she need the fame? So happily take it. It's like if you have one of those little plastic fake rings, and then somebody gives you a real golden ring, you'll happily give away the plastic fake ring. Not, of course, that Devaki is tasting anything that's like plastic or fake, but fame, what is fame? Mother Yashoda happily gives that away, and Devaki also would happily give that away. But anyways, Yashoda is therefore defined in this act. Yashoda Dati. Yashoda. She's giving away the fame of being the mother of Krishna. But still, she is the instrument by which Krishna is able to taste this fear. We hear in Damodarashtakam. Actually, I'll speak a little bit of the pastime and then I'll speak on Damodarashtakam. So, we know which pastime's coming. One day, Mother Yashoda, all of her maidservants, they're very, very busy. Because today is Diwali. And so even today we see how much great effort is put into Diwali. Deepavali. So much effort is put in. So all of the maidservants, they're running around preparing all the decorations and everything. And not only that, my spiritual master, he was saying that the day after, there's another special holiday. We prepare lots of bhoga for who? Giriraj? Well, in this case, Indra, because they're getting ready for Indra Yagya. Yes, in general, we prepare for Giriraj, but at this time, They still were preparing for Indra. So it was Indra Puja. They're all getting ready for preparations. All the devotees are rushing around preparing for grand worship of Indra. Some glorious demigod worship in Vraj. So all of the maidservants, they're running around preparing for this as well. And so Mother Jashoda, she thinks this is the perfect time now for me to feed Krishna. Because Krishna, he's always running around, always stealing the dairy products of all of the other houses. There must be something wrong with how my maidservants are making it. So on that day she was waiting. In fact, there were special cows she was waiting to give their milk. Because these cows, the moment they eat the grass instantly flavors it as if there's like a spice mix inside. That's how nice it tasted. So these cows, she knew, they had finally got the whole set of milk, and she thought, wow, the stars have aligned. Now I can prepare with this special milk a preparation so good, Krishna will not be dissatisfied. So everything she was doing to please Krishna. In fact, Krishna, he used to always run around and steal all of the ghee and everything. And Balaram, sometimes he would tell the mothers, all the gopis, he would tell all of them, just give Krishna the ghee. He's going to get it either way. Give him the butter. He's going to get it either way. Better you save your pots. You save all of the trouble. You save all of the harassment. Just give it to him. Just end this, please. As we know, Balaram, he is the Maryada Purush. He wants to see Dharma being upheld. Save Krishna from the sin. Just give it to him. As a mercy to Krishna, do this. And so when they would go to Krishna, they thought, actually, Balaram, he's speaking some sense here, the wise older brother. And so they would go and they would bring the butter to Krishna. And Krishna, when getting it, he would reject it. He'd say, do you take me as a dishonorable man? You won't let me work for my wages? You think I'm some beggar who takes things freely? No, I will work honorably and steal the butter from you. You don't need to bring it to me. So Krishna, he would reject it like this. So, like this, Krishna would always go around. But so Mother Jashoda, she thought, now is my time. Now is my time. I will make something so splendid, he won't run away anywhere else. He won't go to any other house. This will be so wonderful. And so we know she's stirring and stirring. And while she's stirring, she's singing all of these beautiful pastimes of Krishna. She's singing all of these wonderful, spontaneous poems. Because, of course, in that day, that's how people captured things. And still, that is the best way to capture things. We often try to think of photographs and videos and all of these ways to capture events. But all they do is they capture actually very statically. Maybe just the sound, maybe just the image, how the light particles are bouncing off your retinas or whatever. I dropped out of biology, so I can't exactly remember. But whatever the description is, they just capture the auditory and the visual aspects of an event. But Mother Jashoda, she's relishing the best way to capture an event, the best way to capture Krishna Leela. Through poetry. Because poetry is very special in that poetry and song does not capture just the image. It captures the mood. It captures the experience of such a pastime. So it might seem like antiquated means. We might think if Mother Jashoda was today, she would have set up her phone with a recording of Krishna running around. But no, even today, Mother Jashoda still, she would be singing this poetry, because in that way she can relish the experience of Krishna, not just some image, but the experience, the fullness of Krishna Leela. So like this, she's churning, and she's engaged constantly in remembrance of Krishna. His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he would sometimes ask his disciples, how often are you thinking about Krishna? And they'd say, oh, Guru Maharaj, while I'm doing seva, I'm thinking, this is for Krishna, so by remembering my seva, I'm remembering Krishna. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he would speak heavily. He would say, no, until you're naturally, without trying, even while washing the pots, or even while going out and doing all sorts of sevas, while you are cleaning the temple, while you are preparing this or preparing that. If you are not spontaneously thinking, why are you not spontaneously thinking yet? Obviously, he's not pushing them to artificially think. But he's saying, he's pushing them hard. He's saying, why are you not relishing? Why are you not spontaneously thinking how beautiful is Krishna? I just want to sing songs while I'm washing the pots. I know when I wash the pots, I'm thinking, how many are left? That's my main meditation. But Mother Jashoda, while doing work, she's thinking, relishing, how beautiful is Krishna? How wonderful is his personality? So it gets so bad in our conditioned state, sometimes even while chanting, we don't relish the name of Krishna or the form of Krishna. We relish all sorts of other things. But no, Mother Jashoda, obviously, Nitya Siddha, or any Siddha, even a sadhana Siddha is like this. But Siddha, she's relishing constantly Krishna's form, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna himself, Krishna's name. And they're all there. So anyway, so she keeps on going. And at this time, Krishna, he wakes up. And waking up, he thinks, oh, where's my mother gone? And so he thinks a few things. I'm going to rush to the end so we don't go over time. He thinks, where's my mother? She's abandoned me. So he goes out and he's walking around, and freshly woken up, he thinks a very relatable first thought. He thinks, I'm really hungry. I'm really, really hungry. And so he's going around and he's thinking, where's Mother Jashoda? But what happens? He can hear Mother Jashoda singing kirtan, singing the glories of Krishna. And so he goes there. Again, there's a purport to this. If we wish to attract Krishna, we should engage in the glorification of Krishna, not that Krishna will hanker after us. But then we might think, what is the quality of my kirtan? I'm covered in so many anarthas. Well, then naturally, Krishna will come to the kirtan of the siddhas, of those great devotees who are not covered in anarthas. And therefore, if we get their association, then naturally Krishna will be there as well. Krishna is drawn to the kirtan, the glorification of the pure, great devotees. And every act they do, of course, is kirtan, not just the singing or speaking. So Krishna, he goes and he tries to find Mother Jashoda. And he finds her, and we know famously he's saying, I'm hungry. And she tells him, stop Krishna. I'm doing this for you. She's not saying, stop, I have other priorities. She's thinking, I need to finish this milk, this dairy preparation, so that I can please Krishna. So she says, stop, just 1 second. But Krishna, he's not having any of this. Krishna's not having any of that. So he goes and he hugs her from behind. And Mother Jashoda, her heart melts. And so naturally then, she allows Krishna. Krishna takes his foot and she picks him up and lets him climb onto her. And she begins to breastfeed him. While breastfeeding him, she keeps on feeding. But as she keeps on feeding, Krishna doesn't stop drinking. Because Krishna, he's not concerned with milk. Krishna's hunger, Krishna has how much opulence, how much wealth Krishna has. In Brahma Samhita, we read that wonderful description of how many thousands of goddesses of fortune are constantly propitiating his every will. But no, what Krishna is feeding off is Mother Jashoda's devotion. And so he's feeding and feeding and feeding, but how can Krishna be satisfied by any devotion? In every moment he becomes more and more hungry for it. And so he keeps on going. But the milk at this point, it's a long while. It starts boiling over. And the reason why, we shouldn't think it's because a question of time. In Krishna's pastimes, time is this and that, space is this and that. It doesn't really matter. Because the milk is a personality. Everything in Vraj is Chaitanya, is conscious. It's all a personality. And so the milk, seeing Mother Jashoda breastfeed Krishna, is thinking, oh, Krishna's not stopping. Oh, how can I ever compete with Mother Jashoda's breast milk? I'm nothing compared to that. Oh, Krishna, he's never going to stop. What's the point of my life? Krishna will never drink me. He will never taste me. What is the point of my existence if I cannot be relished by Krishna? And so he thinks, in this moment, I have no other point to my life. And he jumps into the fire. He thinks, what is the point to my life if I cannot be consumed by Krishna? And he decides, I will end it all. And so the milk begins to jump out into the fire like this, completely depressed and dejected. My life's purpose is gone. And like this, Mother Jashoda, instantly she runs. And she goes, not thinking, oh no, the milk is overpouring, but no, the offering I had ready for Krishna, it is being burnt. And Krishna, oh, he's not having any of this. He's thinking, oh, this is severe. I'm a devotee of Narayan. And so this is Vaishnava Parad. This is great Vaishnava Parad. Mother Jashoda, she is performing. What is she doing? I'm being insulted in my own house. My mother is neglecting me, and she's running after some pot of milk. I'll show her what happens. You know what? Forget Mother Jashoda. I will show what pots of milk get. Pots of dairy get when they try and take the attention away from me. I'm the all-attractive Krishna. Everything's meant to revolve around me, not this pot of milk. So Krishna, he takes a stone. Also bites his lip and all, but again, I don't want to go over time. So he grabs a stone and he smashes up a pot. Some acharyas say, my spiritual master was mentioning, some acharyas describe it as Krishna like a thief. He makes a small little hole and then pulls it all out. Other acharyas describe like an angry little child. He smashes it to bits and then just grabs whatever he can from the floor. Either is nectarian description. So of course Krishna grabs this, but then the reality of it all hits him. Oh no, I'm going to be in trouble. So he runs away. And Mother Jashoda, after she's finishing taking care of the overpouring milk, she finds all of these remnants and she thinks, if Krishna was here, I could believe it was something else that did it. But because Krishna is not here, I think it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Krishna's absence, Krishna, he's always there when something's going wrong. So if he's not here, then it's clearly intentional. Krishna's, he's doing a runner. So Mother Jashoda, she takes out the bamboo stick. I remember my mother, she would never actually hit me with it, but she would always take out a wooden cooking spoon. And by Krishna, when that wooden cooking spoon came out, speaking of fear, all of the fear in the world would come over me. I would just listen. Also my sister, whenever we would act out, my mother would pull out the wooden cooking spoon. And actually it reached the point, we have a dog. And when we were small, the dog never got addressed, but even then, if the dog started misbehaving, my mother would pull out the wooden cooking spoon, and the dog would turn around and run away. So she never did anything with it, but that's I think, one of those universal aspects of the motherly love. So she would pull out the wooden spoon, and she would put the fear of Krishna into us. But anyway, so Krishna, he's now very afraid. Mother Jashoda, she's chasing after me. She's going to get me. He's running very, very afraid. And so here we find this is how Krishna tastes fear. Not a fear coming from demons, but a fear coming from his devotees. And therefore we read in the Dhammadarashtakam. That was the point I was trying to get at earlier. Namamishwaram Sachidananda Rupam. So the whole first two texts of Dhammadarashtakam are actually one long sentence in Sanskrit. We know a sentence has subject, object, verb. So the verb is at the beginning, namami. I, give my namas, I give my obeisances. And then the rest, the subject is implied because ami is the first person singular. So I am doing this worship. And then who is the object? Well, the object is the remainder of the first two texts. So Ishwaram, Sachidananda Rupam. All of these descriptions actually, if we had more time, I'd get into it, but they're gradations. Higher and higher and higher the conception of Krishna is getting. Higher and higher and higher. So initially it's Ishwar. Namam Ishwaram. Ishwaram, the Supreme Controller. Higher than that is the Supreme Controller who is Sachidananda Rupam. And then Lasat Kundalam. It is that Sachidananda Rupam with the beautiful swinging earrings. So with his qualities, like this, so it gets higher and higher and higher. If you read it, you can piece it together. It's pretty obvious how it's going higher and higher and higher. So there's swinging shark-shaped earrings. Actually, swinging is one way to define it. Another way is that by their swinging, because they're also devotees. The milk is a devotee, the earrings are devotees. They're actually kissing the cheeks of Krishna as they swing. They're expressing their devotion. Anyway, so all of this description happens. But then the highest aspect we hear is when the pastime begins. And then what is it? It is paramrishtam atyam tata drutya gopya. So it is Krishna who is caught from behind. Who is caught from behind by his mother. Yashodabhyo lukhaladhavamanam. So we hear this description. Krishna is running away in fear. And there's a very specific meaning. Caught from behind. Caught from behind means Mother Jashoda, even if Krishna resists, If you get caught from the front, that means at the end you gave up. But when you get caught from behind, that means at the last second you were resisting. So even if they resist, Krishna is captured by his devotee. So like this we hear, but Krishna is running away, and how much fear? He's running so quickly, Damodar Ashtakam is describing. His running is fast, his running is quick. So quick, this Supreme Personality of Godhead, which Ishopanishad says can outrun all those running. Even the demigods cannot reach him. He's struggling to outpace a middle-aged mother in Braj, but not any old middle-aged mother. We must understand. A Nitya Siddha, a great devotee of the Lord. So she captures him. So how much fear there must be for Krishna to give it all, and yet he's running away afraid. So this is the glory of Krishna. This is how Krishna can be Rasaraj. He feels that fear from the love of his devotees, not from the hatred of his enemies. Because when the hatred of his enemies come in, then it's all Aishvarya. What can you do to me? Who are you? But when it's the love of his devotees, then no matter how much Krishna resists, he's caught from behind. And therefore we hear, Iti driksvali labhir ananda kunde svaghosham nimajantam. So we know the meaning of this text is, what's the meaning of the text? Iti driksvali labhir Ananda kunde svaghosham nimajantam. Yes, so he drowns the residents of Vraja. Iti just means thus. So these past two texts have been describing the pastime. Drik, so the saying of. Swa lilabhir, swa means his own. Lilabhir means through his lila. Abhihi is the ending for the instrumental, in case you don't have any friends like me. But lilabhir, iti drik swa lilabhir, in the instrumental. Ananda kunde, we can understand. Ananda kund, the pond of bliss. Swa ghosham, swa his own again, ghosham his associates. Swa ghosham, akhyapayan, no. He's immersing them. Like this, because of these beautiful pastimes, he's immersing all of Raj into the Ananda Kund. That's one way to understand it. But Sanatana Goswami, he gives a second way to understand it. Because Svaghosham, Sva itself can also mean just the associates. Ghosham is almost redundant. But it's used for meter, for poetic license. It's a valid usage. But Ghosham can also mean the glorification of. So the other way we can understand it is Itidrik Swali Labhir, through these described pastimes. Through these Itidrik Swali Labhir, Ananda Kunde, in the pond of Ananda, of bliss, Swaghosham Nima Jantam. So through the announcement, through the glorification of his devotees, Swaghosham, because Ghosham can mean to announce, and Swa means his own. So through the announcement, through the glorification of his devotees, which happens, Swali Itridrik Swali Labhir, through his own pastimes, through that glorification of his associates, which happens through these pastimes being broadcast to everyone, Krishna himself places himself in the Ananda Kund. Krishna himself tastes that ecstasy through the glorification of his devotees, who are the only ones who are able to inspire fear in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, who is Krishna afraid of? He is afraid of his devotees, not in a painful way, but in an ecstatic way. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki.